In 1893, German immigrant Adolf Luetgert was a Chicago celebrity, dubbed the Sausage King. His business was booming, especially after his Frankfurters became a hit at the Chicago World's Fair. He was clearing $75,000 a year a fortune back then. But Adolf had ambitions that were even bigger than his famous sausages, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even his own wife, stand in his way. Just a few years later, this celebrated Sausage King found himself at the center of a horrifying scandal. He was charged with murdering his wife, Louise. The newspapers had a field day, with headlines suggesting the unthinkable, that he had ground up her body in one of his factory's sausage-making vats with no body to be found. Chicagoans were captivated and horrified. Many believed the rumors, imagining that Louise had been seasoned, processed, and sold to the public. The scandal was so huge that it didn't just tank Luetgert's sales. It cast a shadow over every sausage maker in the Midwest. Suddenly, everyone was suspicious of what was really in their sausage. Adding fuel to the fire were whispers about Adolf's personal life. He was known as a bit of a ladies' man and was reportedly tired of his wife. But the rumors weren't just about infidelity. A darker cloud of suspicion had followed him for years, stemming from a violent death back in 1879. A man had been found beaten to death in a barn behind Luetgert's old saloon, with a thick plug of tobacco forced down his throat. It was a strange, personal feeling crime. While police investigated, nothing came of it.
But the whispers that Luetgert knew something never quite died down. Then another story of his violent temper surfaced.
In 1889, a woman named Maria Hell sued him on behalf of her husband, Frank, one of Luetgert's employees. She claimed Adolf found fault with Frank's work and beat him so severely in the head that he became delirious. After wandering away from home, Frank was found by police, declared insane by a court, and sent to an asylum. A pattern was emerging. The press latched onto these stories, painting a picture of a man with a history of violent outbursts. Some things, it seems, never change. So, what really happened? Did Adolf Luetgert make his wife disappear? Were there early warning signs that he was capable of such a monstrous act? Let's rewind the story of the Sausage King. It's an easy one! Adolf Luetgert arrived in New York from Germany in his early 20s with just $30 to his name. He quickly found work as a tanner, a trade he'd learned back home. But he was restless and hungry for a fortune, so he headed west to the Midwest, settling first in Quincy, Illinois, and then in the bustling city of Chicago. Years later, a wealthy, bearded Luetgert loved to tell the story of his arrival in Chicago,
Claiming he had only 3 cents in his pocket.
through sheer hustle and business smarts, he worked his way up, earning the title Sausage King. His path wasn't a straight line. He worked in a leather tannery, then in the meatpacking industry, where the endless supply from the Union stockyards must have sparked an idea. In 1872, with $4,000 saved up, he opened a saloon and grocery store. As a side hustle, he started selling fresh meat door-to-door, and his customer base grew rapidly. He soon realized that peddling meat was far more profitable than running the saloon. With $10,000 in savings, he sold the store and opened a small sausage factory. His specialty was summer sausage, a spiced blend of beef and pork cured to withstand Chicago's hot summers without refrigeration, which was still in its infancy. At a time when the beer industry monopolized the ice supply, summer sausage was the perfect pantry staple, and Adolf was there to provide it. His first wife, Caroline, with whom he had 2 sons, died in 1881. Her death was ruled natural. It was around this time that suspicion began to follow him, especially after the unsolved murder in his barn. Not long after Caroline's death, Adolf remarried a German domestic named Louise Luetgert, who was 10 years younger than him. In a surprising move, he sold his business and moved with Louise to a 60-acre farm near Elgin, Illinois. He later said he was burned out and needed a break. But Louise quickly grew tired of country life and demanded they return to the city. As he later admitted, you couldn't tie her to the farm if you paid her ever so much. The romance was already fading. They returned to Chicago, and Adolf reopened his sausage business, which thrived once again. But he had bigger dreams. Inspired by the success of companies like Oscar Mayer, he wanted to build a massive sausage empire. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair was his goldmine. His business built on things like pig snouts and tails.
But his queen, Louise, wasn't happy.
She had begged him not to put all their savings into one massive factory. She wanted him to invest a smaller amount and diversify the rest. The Sausage King won the argument, but Louise never let him forget it. Even as profits soared, she constantly chided him for pouring everything back into the plant. Adolf tried to appease her by building a lavish home, a short distance from the factory, so she wouldn't have to live with the smell of curing meat. But the nagging continued, and for good reason. From 1894 to 1896, things took a turn. Luetgert later admitted, "I had built my factory for running a business too large for the capital I had." The massive expenses started eating away the profits. The "I told you so" arguments between the king and his queen became legendary in the neighborhood. Fed up with the constant fighting, Adolf moved out of their home and into a bedroom at the factory, with only his Great Dane for company. Yet, strangely, he still walked over to the house every evening for dinner. Louise didn't know the full extent of their financial troubles, but she suspected the worst as Adolf began taking out loans to keep the factory afloat. Her scolding grew more furious, and there was talk she was preparing to leave him. Eventually, the business bled so much red ink that Luetgert had no choice but to shut it down, putting 200 men out of work. The factory was on the verge of being seized by the sheriff. Then, on May 1st, 1897, Louise Luetgert vanished. Their son, Louis, remembered seeing his father arrive home around 10 p.m. that night, leaving his parents in the kitchen as he went up to bed. The next day, Louise was gone. When confronted by family, Adolf claimed she had just left for a few days. Later, he suggested she had taken her own life over the collapse of his sausage empire. Louise's brother Diedrich didn't buy it. On May 4th, he confronted Adolf, who admitted he hadn't even called the police.
Diedrich went straight to the authorities, and the press got wind of the story. The pressure cooker was on.
Police dragged the Chicago River, a known dumping ground for boaties of all kinds, but found nothing. The old unsolved murder in Luetgert's barn resurfaced, and reporters dug into it with renewed vigor. The victim, Hugh McGowan, was a 64-year-old who is sometimes given to drink. A coroner's jury had cleared Luetgert, ruling the death a stroke.
But how do you explain the gash on his head and the massive plug of tobacco shoved down his throat?
As the investigation into Louise's disappearance intensified, the city became obsessed. Neighbors, ex-employees, and reporters all offered their theories.
On May 17th, the one-time Sausage King was arrested.
At his preliminary hearing, witnesses came forward. One told of Luetgert's growing indifference to Louise.
Another described seeing him on the night she disappeared, cooking a strange, caustic witch's brew in a massive vat at the factory.
The stage was set for one of the most sensational trials in Chicago history. The trial, which began in August 1897, would feature a horrific experiment by prosecutors trying to dissolve a corpse. Countless Louise sightings across the country, tales of Adolf's wandering eye, and contradictory testimonies, all leading to the grisly question of what truly happened to Louise Luetgert. Would the Sausage King swing from the gallows? Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button, and come back next week for the gruesome conclusion to one of the most bizarre murder cases in Chicago's history. Thanks for watching.